Server-side rendering is the latest web dev trend, but for all of us Gen Z devs who still don't know what a PHP is, there are frameworks built around allowing us to use React with server-side rendering. The most popular of which being next.js, a framework maintained by a company called Vercel. It's extremely easy to use, so let's jump straight into this and start a Next.js project from scratch using Tailwind CSS and hosting it on Vercel. To create a new project, we use the command npx create next app with the argument -e with Tailwind CSS. This allows us to yeet all those config files into the project as if we weren't spoiled enough already. And then we have to give our project a name. I fittingly called mine YouTube tutorial. The result of that command should give you a folder directory that looks something like this. So as you can see, we have a pages directory, which is what we're going to focus on for this tutorial. Basically, everything inside of this pages directory directly maps to an endpoint in the URL.
What? I do not understand.
All right, I get it. That may be kind of confusing. Let's give a couple examples to try and understand what's going on here. So we have our index.js, and that maps to this route. So if I go to localhost port 3000 / then I will see my index.js contents. However, if I create a new file and I call it puppies.js, then I can go to /puppies and see that component. Then I can nest routes within each other using directories. So if I create a folder with the name puppies and I put an index.js inside of that, that will be /puppies. But then I could create a search file and have /puppies/search. I'm hoping you're understanding kind of how this works so far. We can also make routes dynamic, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a couple seconds. But anyways, let's get an actual dev server running. And to do that, we're going to cd into our directory and run npm run dev. And there you can see in the console, the server started and listening on localhost port 3000. So we can hop over to the browser and go to localhost port 3000 and see exactly what we're supposed to see. Welcome to Next.js. This is the template site that Next.js comes prepackaged with. We can just delete all of this code and we can start building our own app. So I'm going to rename this to counter++ and we're going to get started. So this is the basic app that we're going to build. It's a counter app. You can see we have a button here in the middle of the screen. You click it, it goes up by 1. We also have a count by route that'll take in a dynamic parameter of how much we want to count by. So we can see this is a count by 5. We can change it ourselves in the route and just go to something like count by 100. So that's the project. I'm not going to dive too deep into the React. I'm going to have everything on GitHub though, so if you want to see how we do it, go ahead and check there. So let's jump back into the code. We're in index.js right now. First, we need to import useState from React, and then we need to actually create a state variable for the count. And then we're going to put in some code here so that we have the count displayed and we're increasing it by every button press. And now you see that we have a nice little page here with a button that every time we click it increases the counter by 1. And obviously if we go ahead and refresh the page, the state's going to reset. So let's improve this. So now let's create a page or a route within Next.js that takes in a dynamic variable and allows us to count by that amount. So if we go to /count by /5, it'll count by 5. Or if we go to 100, it'll count by 100. To achieve this in Next.js, we first want to create a directory under our pages directory and call it something like count by. And count by is going to contain routes underneath it, specifically increment.js. And we're encapsulating increment in square brackets because this tells Next.js that this is a dynamic route and that we should treat the value here as a variable. To start off, we'll just import useState from React and we'll import useRouter from Next. Then we can just create a basic React component here and we'll create some state to store our count variable. Now we can use that useRouter import and get the router object off of that and then get the increment value off the query. And now we'll just copy paste the same JSX from the beginning, but change one thing with the onClick method and using the increment value that we get from our router query. And now when we switch back over to our web page, if we go to /count by /100, we can see that the counter accurately counts up by 100 each time we click the button. Works perfect. Now this is great, but we got to polish it up a bit and add a nav bar. So the way I like to start this out is by creating a components folder and keeping all of my non-page components in this folder. And this is purely personal preference, but I like to create a base layout component that I use to enforce a layout across all of my pages. And then we'll create another component for the nav bar itself. Now, the nav bar component is relatively simple, but I do want to point out that we're using the link component imported from Next, and this allows us to wrap around our A tags and override the href. This is the way you route to other pages in Next.js. And then we're going to hop into this layout component. We want to just import the nav bar component and show the nav bar above any of the children that get passed into the component. And finally, we're going to hop into app.js. This is our top level component, and we want to go ahead and wrap our layout that we just created around this component that's already defined with the page props. So that will look like that, and then you should be good. And when you hop back into the browser after saving that, you should see the count by 5 nav bar button showing up now on both pages. Now you can go there, it'll count up by 5. This is all working as expected. Now, I hate to break it to you, but this counter app is probably not going to be your next hit unicorn startup. But what we can do is document the whole process of getting a basic Next.js app with Tailwind onto Vercel. So the next thing we want to do is get it hosted onto Vercel. This is how we do that. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is create a new GitHub repo, and then we're going to be able to copy this HTTPS link so that we can connect our Git CLI here by doing git remote add origin and pasting in the link. And then we're going to use git checkout to create our main branch on our local repo, and then add all of our local changes. Then we need to create a commit for these changes. I'm going to go ahead and name my commit initial commit. You can name it what you'd like. And then we push our changes up to GitHub. I recommend the -u flag anytime you need to set upstream. So you're all done with GitHub. Now let's go to Vercel. Make sure you create an account, and then we can go to create a new project. We can import the Git repository. First, we need to connect it to our Git account. So go ahead and connect. And then you're going to see your Git repo show up. Pick the one that you need. We need the YouTube tutorial. We can see that this is a Next.js project. We're configuring the project. We have environment variables we can set. We have build settings that we can set. But we just want to keep everything stock and go ahead and hit deploy. This is going to start building our code from the GitHub repository and deploying this directly onto Vercel. And then you're greeted with some nice confetti and a congratulations message saying that you have deployed your app. So now let's go see what it actually looks like. If we click this link on the dashboard, it'll take us right to it. We can see hosted on the actual internet, our Next.js app. We have successfully deployed it. And now with your newfound Next.js knowledge, you can start to look at other cool things you could potentially build. Now, we didn't really dive into data fetching or some of the cool things that make Next.js a server-side rendered application. This is very basic, but it gives you a head start into sort of how the technology works. And hopefully in the future, if you like these types of videos, you can follow along as we do more Next.js tutorials and tutorials about cool other technologies out there. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Talk to you later.